All right, perfect. It is the Dan and Dan show, everyone. So I'm Dan Angus.
Yeah, and my name is Dan Tran.
And so together we're going to take you through this morning screen capture for data collection. It's going to be a really exciting, action-packed morning full of hands-on activities, a little bit of theory and practice in terms of methodology. Before we go too far, though, the two of us would also like to acknowledge that where we live, work, and play are the lands of the Turrbal and Niagara in Brisbane, and so we pay our respects to the elders past and present, and acknowledge the important and continuing role that they play within our communities, both at University of Queensland, where Dan is, and at QUT, where I am. Over to you, Dan.
Yeah, awesome. So throughout Tuesday and yesterday, we have learned about different ways to capture social media data, and one of which is API collection. You have seen it through Richard's workshop where he collected Reddit data, Mastodon data, and a bunch of different social media platforms. And then also on yesterday, we learned about data download packages via Michael's and Kelly and myself workshop, where you learn about where participants can request their old data from Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, ChatGPT, even though it's not a social media platform, and whatnot. And today we're going to look into the final method of social media or data donation for the whole week. And it is going to be screen capture. And over here, we are going, the learning outcomes today is obviously we will understand what screen capturing is about, how to design, research studies around it, how to use it safely, effectively, and ethically. And also we need to understand, what are the steps involved? Let's say you install the app and then you start screen capturing, you got the data, and now what you do with the data by some analysis. And
perfect. So let's just start everything with why mobile, because screen capture, we can talk a little bit today about screen capture on laptop or desktops, which is also a really, really useful and important method that many do use. Some will often call it web archival. But today in this session, we're going to talk mostly about screen capture on mobile devices. So that's mobile phones, tablets, and other kinds of portable electronic devices. And really, I think this goes without saying why mobile is important is because it is fundamentally where a lot of activity is happening. So users of various, digital technologies and social media and writ large, we're using mobile phones. And that's where our encounters are happening. And so if we're interested in things like news consumption practices, if we're not capturing data from the user's perspective on their mobile phone, we are likely missing a huge part of the puzzle here when it comes to understanding, those actions and interactions. And so mobile is a really important site for us to attend to. Now, interestingly here as well, I won't beat this drum too hard, but you note, of course, obviously, the smartphone revolution and such happened. Steve Jobs announces the iPhone, the rest is history. What is it? It's a mobile device. It's a music platform. It's a web, like that. I'm not going to try and do his bit. But what's happened is interesting here is that in many ways, I think the field, when it comes to mobile capture software and methods, has lagged because it's been a site where there's not been as much attention as, say, the API-based methods and others that Dan was just talking about. And so that's something that we are really trying to fill a gap here. And so that's where I think today and this morning, think of this as like, this is us playing catch up now, right? When it comes to methods to study mobile. The thing is, and related to that, is that mobile operating systems do not support this form of research observability. Most mobile operating systems, and particularly Apple, thwart our attempts to try to capture data from mobile devices. And that's for good reason, right? We don't want people being able to develop apps which can track our activities, which can do screen capture and such without our consent. And so there's a lot of ways in which the mobile operating systems kind of close down the scope of possibility when it comes to how one would be able to get data ethically from a mobile device. Very much in stark comparison to web and such. You'd say the same, wouldn't you, Dan? In terms of, the ability. So screen capture while it is a brittle way to capture the activity of how someone's using a mobile phone, it is kind of our only way in some ways. There are other ways to get mobile trace data, and we can talk about some of those this morning as well if you're interested, but this is one of those ways in which you can get at some of the kind of media objects that we're interested in, like advertising, say news data and others, where we're interested in tracking that activity over lots of different apps over time, and in a granular way. All right, so how can we actually do this? Dan, do you want to take this?
Yeah, I can. Yeah, so if you has anyone developed an Android application before in this room? Anyone who have like an Android Studio would be? So on Android, the Android Studio is a software development environment that allows you to make use of the Android software development kit. And we can think of it as a toolbox for building Android applications. And after you have created an Android application, after you have coded everything up, you would try to either deploy it into, or in this case, publish it into the Android equivalent of the App Store, being the Google Play Store.
Yeah, Play Store.
And alternatively, you can do a method called side loading. So side loading, it was actually meant for development purpose. So before you can launch your app to Google Play Store, you need to test it. But what we can do is, instead of just using it for development, we can use it as a tool to just install it without deploying to the Google Marketplace. And
has anyone sideloaded an app before? Do you know what this is? Yeah. Sorry, we'll get a microphone.
So aren't there some restrictions on?
Yeah,
it's on. Okay, okay. Aren't there some restrictions of side loading depending on the phone? Like for example, I have a Samsung Galaxy, and I know like I'm not allowed to side load unless I go through a couple settings, turn a few things off,
yes,
then you can side load.
Yeah, exactly. It's a great point. So in certain phones, they come essentially configured to prevent side loading, and that's for, again, that malicious security perspective. So what can happen is, has anyone ever downloaded and clicked on like an SDK file or something, or APK file on their phone? Yeah, right? And it comes up with a bunch of warnings and it says, oh my God, are you sure, right? Like this, because that is a way that like malicious actors can kind of get malicious apps into devices loaded on there. And that's why they do lock phones down usually when it comes to your ability to sideload on there natively. But yeah, you can turn those things off. It's like they make it very like you're doing this at your own risk and all of that, but basically you're turning on like developer controls to be able to kind of sideload on. We'll come back to that because it's a really good point in terms of, from a research practice, why we've pushed to get stuff up authorized on the Play Store versus using sideloading to get it in the hands of participants, because you can imagine a room of 30 participants, getting them all to turn on their developer settings and such, and perhaps us exposing them at risk. But we'll come back to that. It's a great question early.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we'll come back to that at the end when we discuss about limitations of this approach as well. But going back to it, in order to actually capture anything on your phone, we need to enable some kind of accessibility features, and these accessibility features allows you to screen recording first of all, and additionally it will try to analyze a bunch of other information about what app you're using. Let's say if you're in Facebook, then it produces a certain signature we can capture to know that at that point in time you're using Facebook. And then if you are using, let's say, Google Map, which is an app that we don't want to capture, then we can use the same feature to disable screen capturing so we don't accidentally leak information that you didn't intend to share. And the data is, as we really respect the privacy of the participants, we would try to keep everything locally on the phone. And then on the phone, we also do a filtering where we try, as I mentioned, using the accessibility features to detect which app not to capture is one way. And then we also use advanced machine learning methods on your mobile phone as well to detect, even if you're on Facebook, there are certain information you don't want to share. Let's say a post from your family member, you probably don't want to share that with us. And that means all the data, as I mentioned, captured locally, and then after the filtering, it will then be sent to our research cloud for additional processing and enrichment.
Perfect. So this is where there's like one thing we absolutely need to contend with and cover when it comes to screen recording is what we're doing is we're recording a flow or a stream of images. So when we're screen recording on a mobile device using these kinds of approaches, it's creating little video files that are kind of cached locally on that phone. But those video files are essentially just a sequence of images, right? So you think about the frame rate that that's recording at, which we can set and configure. You've essentially just got frame after frame, and these are just a sequenced stream of images. And that's what you're capturing. So unlike other data capture methods, that can create a huge amount of data because it's not like you're just going capture just the one thing. You kind of have to capture everything at once, then post filter to decide what it is you want that's of interest. So that's a huge amount of data. Of course, it's hugely personal data at that point because in that stream, those videos, those images you've created is everything that's happened on that phone at that time. A pop-up message appears from someone because they've got their notifications turned on. They inadvertently switch across into another app and our app is continuing to run for a few seconds and they enter a password. Things like this that are then highly sensitive, perhaps, information that they're using their mobile phone for. While that is recording, now as much as Dan and Abdul and the other team have done a huge amount of work to try and reduce this overhead, we're still talking about an app that's running in the background. And so that will have a non-zero impact on the battery life and overall processing of the phone. Most phones these days, particularly modern models, can deal with this really, really well. But we have noticed for some older models or lower spec phones that resource is, non-insignificant in terms of impact on processing and other features of a phone. And so in some cases, it just won't work because the phone is so low spec that this is just too much for it, perhaps. And as I kind of mentioned, you are flattening everything into an image. So you need to already think at this point, I can see text on my phone screen, but that is not like machine readable text when it's captured. That is flattened in an image. There are artifacts introduced due to the resolution that it's captured at. It's also captured maybe as someone's swiping. And so you're going to actually get sometimes additional motion blur, things like that, because that's how the screen is rendering at that point. And your screen recorder is not gathering something which is necessarily like, it's not trying to reconstruct the screen like the document object model of a web page or something like that. It is literally just frame grabbing the pixels as they're appearing. And so if there's motion blur on the screen, there's going to be motion blur in your image because it's capturing that at its kind of final rendered output. And so Dan kind of alluded to this. There are then two choices that most researchers have. When they're using this kind of screen capture, you could just grab all of that as it is, send it all up to a cloud for post-processing, right? To say, all right, we're going to use our secure cloud, gather everything, and then arrays up there using our machine learning technologies and all that. The advantage to that technique, obviously, is your kind of resource intensiveness only comes about from the recording moment, not then the post-processing on the phone. So you don't have to run machine learning models or things on a phone to clear out the things you don't want. But then, of course, you are transmitting data that is potentially incredibly sensitive information to another source and then having to deal with it at that point. And so your risk of data leakage and such, of course, is higher there. There are public health researchers I know that use this kind of approach. I will never do this as a researcher. I think it is too risky and I'm not willing to do that. You make your own judgments though, okay, around your level of appetite of risk and indeed the situations you find yourself in. I think if you instructed your participants well about the nature of the data leaving the device, that this would be something to kind of mitigate some of that risk. But as I said, we chose a different path, which is the idea of capture and cache on the phone and then process locally on the phone to actually figure out what it is that you want to send off that. And only when you're satisfied that that's the material you absolutely want and you've removed any of the other sensitive context information, that's the point at which you package and send. And of course, at that point, the servers that Dan and the crew maintain are maintained to the highest security level for any kind of research like this. And so even if there was a data leak at that point, hopefully risk is minimized anyway, because we're talking about a bunch of media objects like ads, which, yes, there is a sensitivity, but it's not like we're talking about people's direct messages and things like that. Yeah, another question. Microphone? Sorry.
With that second option, would you then have the opportunity to essentially wait until someone had plugged their phone in at night to charge it, to then do the processing so it's not draining the battery? I was just thinking about the resource overhead.
No, this is really great because that's what it used to
do.
do. That's what it used to do, right? So the original technique used to do this thing where it basically cached all the data over the day, and then when it was plugged in, it'd just fire up and do the processing. Turns out Abdul's a goddamn genius and figured out a far more efficient and awesome way to do it that is just so efficient and amazing. There's a picture I have that when he did this, it was like all the processing spread out on like this classic kind of processing diagram they use in like IT to show like all the various parallel processes going. And it used to be about like that long. So like from kind of input of data to their processing along this long pipeline. And then he sped it up using some very, very clever kind of logic and processing, and it became like this thin line. Like he took it was magnitudes of order faster. Yeah. You guys, do you want to say anything about that, Dan? It was an amazing moment, right? When he cracked that nut, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe for your information, does anyone know who Abdul is, the person that Dan is speaking of?
Yeah.
So like Abdul is our brilliant data engineer based at the Queensland University of Technology, and he is the person responsible for developing the app and also the processing cloud pipeline behind it as well.
Yeah. So yeah, I like to think of like Abdul and Dan as a dynamic duo because like Abdul's more on the app side while Dan's very much on the dashboarding and that cloud side as well.
We'll come back to that later.
But we come back to that later and you can see all Dan's handiwork. But yeah, that there's a real duality here. And I think you're going to get at that is that you don't just have the app, you need the app and you need some way to then interrogate the data and do that, and they become a pair. So this is a bit of just a showcase of how this particular app works. So people download it on their phones. Dan, do you want to take over?
Yeah. So I'm going to grab that as well. Yeah. So the idea is you first download the app onto your phone, and it, as we mentioned, it only works on Android, unfortunately, because the Apple App Store, they put security above everything, and that's good on us. And on the Android device, after you download the app, you will need to share your screen with us. And in this case, with us, it's actually just the app. And what we'll do is it will capture your entire screen, all the activities. However, as I mentioned, we make use of accessibility services so that we don't capture the apps that we did not intend to capture. For example, let's say you spend most of the time looking at your Chrome browser. You are browsing the web using Google, any kind of web applications on there, and then you move on to look at your photos, and that is something we definitely do not want to capture. And then you look at, after browsing through photos, you change your screen, and finally you open up Facebook. And Facebook is the app that we intend to capture. So that is when the screen recording will be turned on. And while you are doing that, it will capture, as Dan mentioned, frame by frames, and also it will cache or store the frames locally for later processing. And over here, after you are done with that, and when you move on to another app, I'm not sure if this is intended, but let's say you open up Google Maps, which is an app that we do not intend to capture, screen recording should be stopped at the moment.
So this represents a moment where we can configure the app to persist after it starts recording on one of those particular apps. And the rationale behind it is for when people are doing fast app switching, so in this case, it's the idea of like they're in Facebook, they've switched out, they've gone to Google Maps because they've seen something that's piqued their interest and they want to find out where that cafe is in something they saw, but then they flick straight back into Facebook. What we found is sometimes you miss then that starting context, that the first few frames when they go back in. And so after a very, very short window of time, this will eventually say stop because it's like, well, they've actually completely left. Like they've properly left Facebook as the app and that kind of session. Whereas for fast switching, we found it easier to kind of leave it on recording. Now, of course, when it comes to the post-processing on the phone, a lot of that will just get deleted instantly because it's outside of context. But it was there as an option to just deal with that thing of when someone's fast switching in and out, it's not having to stop, restart. But yeah, that's configurable, right?
Yeah. And like the way that we handle the data processing and data uploading is via something called a periodic worker. And in the sense of Android development, you can think of worker as basically an application that instead of running and showing things to you, it just runs in the background to do the processing. And in the previous slide, there is a bit about
MP4 chunks.
Yeah, MP4 chunks. And it was because when we first created the app in its original form, the videos files were pretty large, and we found that it quickly overwhelmed your phone storage. And additionally, trying to process a large video file at once, it's going to be very costly. So that is why we limit these into, rather than saving the whole recording session, let's say you browse Facebook for 4 hours, we are not going to store a 4 hours video file on your phone.
Yeah.
We are going to split them into chunks. And they actually don't have a fixed duration. We fix them based on their storage. So each chunk is going to be limited into 2 megabytes.
Yeah. And the cool thing about that is the periodic worker then means that if you're on that 4-hour Facebook session, it means a periodic worker will have actually kicked in while you're still in that session. So it's still recording while there's still a background process that's cleaning up those chunks at the same time, rather than having to wait until the kind of session closes before that can go to work. And so it does mean that it builds that efficiency argument. And there was a lot of learning, particularly around your question around the idea of like the plug-in and do it while it's kind of charging, which, is very sensible. And originally, Philip Kreider, who developed this idea in the first instance, and we've kind of adapted and essentially phoenixed it in a very different way. He had that idea of like, and particularly with older models, that was a big consideration, is kind of do it when it's plugged in. So one of the really cool things about this, and this is something we're going to spend some time on in the next exercise, or the first exercise for the day, we've got 3 exercises for you to do, is around the YOLO v5 inference model. So we're interested in ads, and that's how this came about. We're really interested in capturing mobile ads, and so we thought this is a way to do it. And so the YOLO model, what it does is you can see the 5 screen caps there. What it's doing is the YOLO model is trained to identify ads as they appear within those frames. And so you can see it kind of the yellow boundaries around where the YOLO model's figured out where the ad is in that particular vertical screen. And that's the pieces it's going to take and chunk out. So it's going to cut those out, and it's going to discard everything else. And so it's only going to retain the ads within that. So this ad for a media production with Bill Skarsgård, which looks really cool. So next slide, Dan, if you can. So how we do that though, and this is the first bit of learning that we really need to contend with here in this room this morning, is ads come with features that denote them as ads, that signal this is an ad. And they're consistent within platforms. Now, they're open to change, and that just happened. And we had to rush to update because they changed from sponsored. You can still see it, actually. So this is what they used to be, sponsored. Now they say ad or advertisement, right? And so we had to retrain the model to do this. There's a weakness, but it's a necessary part of the app itself. But these are all the kinds of different ads that you get, where you're getting story ads, you're getting newsfeed ads, you're getting reel ads, footer ads, and others. But in every single case, you can notice that there are visual markers present in particular locations that give away that it's an ad. And so that will be things like, the presence of this text sponsored, but it's always usually under a certain colored text next to a logo in a particular location within the frame. So everything around its actual X, Y kind of, offset to because we can use OCR on this as well. So what it's actually saying, to other visual features are dead giveaways that is in fact an ad and something that we might want to capture. Now, it gets complicated because obviously in some cases you get this kind of, effects where it's not a full opaque background, it's a transparent background. So you need to deal with situations where you're going to get text over the top of differing visual features. That's a little bit tricky as well. But these will always have a particular look and feel, position, things that will signal this is an ad, right? Visually on the page. So yeah, Dan, all right. And that's just the training we did. So we picked a bunch of these. We identified what kinds of ads they were. We honed down on those features, trained a model that's actually incredibly good. So we get about, more than 80, 90% success in terms of detecting ads. And we've tuned it to be more on the sense of safe. So it's actually possibly discarding real ads, but such that we're not getting non-ads, right? So we've tuned for more false negatives than false, so you know what I mean. We're missing a few ads, but we're not getting people's private messages, right?
Yeah, I'm just going to throw in, this is giving us a hint of the technical stack behind the machine learning that we are doing on your device, and it is powered by something called TensorFlow Lite, which is, a lightweight method to deploy a machine learning model onto a mobile device, because as we know, mobile devices are incredibly limited compared to laptops or, computers when it comes to processing and computing powers. And additionally, during the training, we need to cater for light mode versus dark mode, because depending, even though in the previous slide we saw that the sponsor text is usually behind white text, but it can change depending on whether you're in light or dark mode.
Yeah. So your phone configuration changes. That's another thing. It's just layers of complexity here, right? Of different resolutions of phones, different app configurations. As Dan said, light or dark mode. So when you switch your app and it inverts those color palettes, all kinds of things can impact this. And so that's what we need to be attuned to in building our training set to make sure it's trained robust enough, because this is one app that's going to get deployed across all devices. So it needs to be robust. At that point, you can't say, hey, if you happen to have an Oppo this, then download this app. And if you happen to have this version like that, you can somewhat configure apps to do that. But yeah, we're just not dealing with that complexity here. All right. So this is your first exercise. So on your tables, what I want you to do is pick a media type, right? Don't pick ads. We've already done that. So pick another media type. So it could be something like news content or other kinds of content. It could be something specific of political content or content around board games. I don't know. You come up with something that's of interest to you. What I want you to do is think about what are the visual features that you could use from that kind of content to isolate it versus everything else. What would make it unique? What visual presence of visual artifacts, features, icons, text, what would make that something that we could then use that to retrain this app to only find that content within someone's visual feed? And so what I want you to do is isolate that media type first, think of what that is, agree on that. Then we want you to actually try and have a go on your machines, on your phones, screenshotting some examples of that, put it into a document and have a go at actually thinking about what those things look like, right? So we want you to, the point of this is for you to start thinking about, think like the app. How do you think like the app to be able to get at just that content and do that? We're going to spend probably 10 minutes on that because we've got some other stuff to show you. So quick into it, 10 minutes, and then we'll come back. Keep moving. Just because there's a lot to get through, I want to get some discussion at the end. What I want you to do, so can I just get a hands in the room? Who's got an Android phone? Hands in the room. Who's got an Android? No one at that table has an Android? No? One Android here, one there, one there. How many got here? 2? Okay. What I'm going to do is get one volunteer. Maybe Lauren, would you mind joining this table here? Cool. All right. So for those with an Android, if you are comfortable, I can't force you to do this, but you can, for the purpose of the exercise, it might be useful, is to download our app from the Play Store. And then what I'll do is on your tables, we're going to gather around those individuals. So actually it's going to work pretty well. You've got 2 here, so you can kind of split in 2 groups of 3, similar over there, and around there you're going to just be a huddle of 5. So did everyone manage to get that? And if you can't find it through the QR, just go on Google Play and look for Mobile Ad Toolkit and it should come up. All right, so install that. So just a couple of quick things about the UI of the app itself. The app contains a user dashboard. So we created that so users can always see what has been submitted. So that's a really, really core part of this, is making sure users feel part of a process and they can actually review. So the user always has control to delete content as well. So if they see something there that they don't want shared, they can always opt to delete it, and then that will update on the cloud. So if it's already transmitted, it will then go and actually highlight that for deletion and delete that from that. But also many can just use it to kind of look at the ads that they've gathered. And so there's actually a number of users of the app that we have noted that are not enrolled in a study that has otherwise downloaded and used this, right? And so it's like we get ads, but we don't have any other survey data or that attached to it, because obviously these people just find it interesting and useful to have this kind of ad dashboard, which that's really cool. So it has a utility, not just in research. So what I want you to do is, for those who've downloaded it, just have a little bit of a play and explore with the app. It's going to throw up a bunch of permissions dialogues and some things to try and get you to configure it. Dan and I will walk around to help you through, and Lauren will be there as well to help through the permissions dialogues and how you actually set it up on your phone. But yeah, we'll have a go and just see what it does and how it behaves on the phone, because I want you to get a bit of an understanding, particularly at setup when you first install it, of the various things it's prompting and what it's going to be like for a user. Yeah? Oh, you need the QR code? Yeah, that's fine. Sorry. That experience with the others on your table so they can kind of see it, so you all follow it together. Hopefully that was instructive, informative. What I've noticed is we managed to get a couple of the app installed on a few phones. We managed to scroll and see a few ads, and we managed to, in a few of them, we forced processed them. So we clicked on the process all my ads now. What that does, we gave an option for some people, because as participants, we found they were getting really nervous because they thought their ads weren't being uploaded. So we gave them the option to hit that button of process, and it gives them a sense of agency of all my data is being sent to the great researchers, and now I'm satisfied that they've seen my ads. So that gives a sense of agency of them actually physically transmitting the data off their phone, even though periodically it's going to be coming along and doing that anyway in the background. Wait 15 minutes, it'll scoop them up, it'll process and send them. The idea of that user agency is something that's sometimes important. So yeah, you can click that process ads. For some of you, it went through the processing steps. It doesn't appear in the dashboard yet because it's still got to process at the server. It does some additional, we're going to get to this in a second, this next section, what it does on the server side, process the actual ad data, and then that's when it actually re-updates. So when people are looking at the ads in their own dashboard, one thing to think about, or just to note there, is that ad is not now sitting locally on their device. It has been sent, and then actually the app is communicating with our server with the ID to pull it down for that user. So that user is essentially a client of our server infrastructure at that point, and it's rendering it from the server. So that's why it can't see the ad, because the ad doesn't exist on the device anymore. It's been sent, and we're waiting for that to connect. All right. Let's talk about the overall architecture. Yes. So this is the cool bit, right? So this is where we bring it home.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, so we actually had a look at this part before, where you have a device.
Use this one, Dan, if you want. Come over.
Oh,
Yeah,
that'd be easier. And you have some computer vision models. In this case, it's the YOLO, you only look once model. There are actually two of them on your device. One to detect whether you're seeing an ad, and the other is to detect which part of your screen is an ad. And after that, you got a screenshot. And then when you click on that dispatch ads button that Dan mentioned, that is when the screenshot will be sent to the server. But if you are not too nervous and you let it do the dispatching automatically, it works the same way as well. And once it reaches our server, we collect them in a database, and we call it in these observations, a cage, if you will. But the idea of it is going to be temporary. So this is where we apply different filters. So in addition to the on-device filtering, we do another layer of filtering on our cloud server as well. Because, well, on-device processing is incredibly limited. So there will be false positives, there will be false negatives coming. So that is where we filter out all these false negatives. So we try our best to not get any personal information from you. And after that step, we retain these observations, and they are actually formalized as ads now. That means this is the information we are going to show to the researchers. And after this step, the other ones, they are going to be more on enriching the apps, like trying to map the app trying to match the apps to more data. Let's say if you want to classify the ad you're seeing, because nowadays we have large language model that can look at the ads and then tell it is an alcohol ad, it is a gambling ad, it is a political ad, for example, then we can enrich it in that step. And another form of enrichment that we do is because we have the ad in the form of screenshots. Now we also find out that Meta allows you to query the advertisement. So that means if you look for the name of a certain page, the advertisement for that page would come up. So you can use that to.
Yeah, if I can just jump in here, Dan. Yeah, no. So this is what we were talking about just over here, right? So the idea of like you've captured a flat screenshot of some kind of social media post, a news item, whatever it is that you've tuned the app to do. It's at this point that you can connect that, because that's like it's an evidence point of like, well, this user has looked at this particular thing, but actually I want the full video, and I've only got the first 3 seconds because they scrolled past it before they watched the full 5-minute YouTube vid or whatever. But like, say you were capturing YouTube videos using this, you would still have the name, hopefully through the OCR process, of the creator. You've got a few screenshots of the actual content. And so what the enrichments can do is, for example, using the YouTube API, it could go and grab from that channel all of the video content posted by that individual, and it could then actually play some of those videos to try and then do a visual match between the frames that you have and the frames of those videos that they've posted. And hopefully if there's a strong enough match, you can then go, well, evidence is that this is this video, right? And then using the YouTube API, you could download all the metadata around that video or the actual content itself in a rich format, not a flattened kind of low res grainy image. And this is exactly what Dan's talking about we do with the Facebook like meta ad library. So we use the ad library using the information we can get from the ad to then try and match in the library the actual ad as it exists in the library. So you get the full res copy of the ad, you get any videos, you get metadata, you get spending information occasionally if it's of politics or issues, you get all that. And how that works in the background for those interested, it uses a Levenstein distance. So you get all of the ads from a page and then ranks in terms of what it thinks is the strongest candidate for that matches that. So it will try and connect those and keep both the original one that the user saw as well as what it thinks is the best candidate for the actual media image. Question? The A/B testing stuff, yeah. Yeah. Totally. So the variations, like when they're registered in the ad library, you're not just going to get one version. You're going to get the thing like this was shown to 20 different. In fact, at the back end, if Abdul is here to tell you, he keeps everything, right? So he grabs all the ads, around that and maintains copies of them. So we've got that then. So you've got just the one seen by that person, but you've then absolutely got the ability to go and look, are there other versions of this ad and what they look like in the back end? Cool, because there's an ephemerality question here. Sometimes for the enrichment bit, a user's seen it in that moment. There is a window of time for where you can probably get that from a library or some other method, and that window is shrinking the moment you see it on the phone. And so it's like get it. And so a lot of this happens very much in the moment. So these are being fired off almost like it's not instantaneously, but it's a very short time after that ad has actually found its way into our cloud. Sorry, Dan.
All right, yeah, I'm just gonna take over a bit as well. So yeah, after the enrichment, you are going to get what we call rich data objects, and they are basically huge JSON file. And I hope you remember what I talked about JSON yesterday. So yeah, it is nested data containing a lot of information about the device itself that the user is seeing, about the user. In some studies, we do collect the user demographics, so that's going to end up in there as well. The advertisements itself, obviously the OCR, the optical character recognitions, and then on the enrichment data, including classifications and the commercial content library enrichment, like the original ads. And after that, because they are raw JSON file, they are not really readable from a user perspective. So we do another step that's called indexing, and it is a technical term for trying to make the JSON lookupable, so that you can look them up easily. And the process of looking up is done on the dashboard side. We build a REST API. And yeah, you can think of an API as a way to communicate between a server and your Google Chrome browser, for example. And that is where we host our dashboard. You can use your browser to look at our researcher dashboard. And as a researcher, you can query the apps. Let's say you recruited 50 participants and you have collected the activation code from the app. They send that to you. You can query them in the dashboard. And you can browse through the ads and then start labeling. And labeling is a process where you can assign a tag to the ad. Let's say manually, you look through them, you see this is an alcohol ad, so you tag it as alcohol. And that will use the REST API so that you can share the tags with other researchers as well.
Perfect. So we'll skip through this. If anyone's interested in some more of the server-side stuff, come at us and we can talk through it. But just to say, to Dan's point, there's a whole bunch of points. This goes to the idea of what we were just talking about. When the mobile device packages what it thinks is an ad and sends it as a data package, there's a whole bunch of this processing that happens. So additional points where it's actually going, no, that's a false positive, get rid of it. That doesn't happen that often because this is very strict, but it's there as a safeguard anyway. Retained ads through, there's this OCR and other approaches formalized, and that creates what we call an observation. So it's actually like an ad is the actual ad itself, right? So, Coca-Cola have got an ad on, Instagram. It looks like, it's FIFA World Cup, whatever. That is the ad. That ad may be seen by this person and this person. Each of those is an observation, right? So ads are unique. Observations, there can be multiple observations, and the same person could observe, say, the same ad more than once. So we do all of this. We build exactly to Dan's points, go through, connect with the commercial content library to enrich that. So that's where it goes and gathers the real ad from the ad library if it can find it, and does this to build this and actually download all that. And then there's a whole bunch more even from that point where we do a bunch of other cleaning, relationship stuff. This is what I was talking about with regards to the idea of lots of different ads and it trying to compare visually and textually. So it does a multimodal comparison to try and make sure it can match the observation of the ad to the real ad from the library to try and pull those together. So yeah, it's very, very cool. This part took a long time. But anyway, this is Dan's baby. So I'll let him talk about it. This is the researcher dashboard.
Yeah, awesome. I think it may be cool if I do it using a demo instead of just using the slides. So I will spin that up on on Dan's laptop as well.
Cool. All right. Jump into Firefox. I think it's in.
Firefox, and here we go.
Yeah. All right. Now just share our screen share. Hang on. I'll just.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is the one. Awesome. All right, and yeah, this is the Australian Ad Observatory dashboard, the tool that is powering, I would say, 6 to 7 research projects till now.
Yeah.
And it has been visualizing data of over 350,000 ads.
Yeah.
And what it does is, at the moment, we don't really have a big active study, so we are not seeing a lot of ads in the past 7 days, but we do have some ads, and researchers are able to browse through them, look at the ads individually, and then they can tag them.
So this is live, everyone. So this is happening right now. The other thing that's really cool about this is, as Dan said, when you've got an active field study in, you can monitor how many ads are coming in. And that's a really important part of this, because this is very, very like infrastructure at the edge, right? It is like we are operating with no safety harness. It is absolutely, every day something can happen. And so Android decide they're going to change some part of the operating system. Facebook decide, or Meta decide they're going to change how ads are presented. And that means that you could just see a complete drop in the number of ads being donated, even though you're paying 20 people to run the app on their phones. And so there's a big part of what Dan built here is for us as researchers to be able to check in every day to look at, are we still getting ads? Like, we're paying participants. Are they actually turning the app on? Are they leaving it off on their phone? Like, is there something else happening? And so this is really, really important in particularly the moment when you're in the field with the app being used to have this kind of health check. Because, Dan, like we've had quite a number of people who are like, yeah, I've got the app running, and we can definitely see they've not got the app running, or that it's like, or there's something else going on where actually they think they've got it running, but they haven't turned something on well, all those accessibility settings, as you saw, little bit tricky to get your head around. So this is really important for the general monitoring of data ingestion, right, coming in. Sorry, Dan.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, for example, if we look at this particular participant, they may say that they have been collecting apps since, the 18th of June until now, but then the only record that we see from them is a single ad on Friday the 19th. And by, we can look into their individual record as well. This is their individual dashboard. So you can see the app that they have seen. And additionally, Bless Abdul, who has built something we call the comprehensive statistical report, which allows us to see their activity. And if we look at this particular person, they have been using Instagram quite a lot, but then they seem to have a bit of trouble with the accessibility services because they have turned it off since the 22nd of June.
So this is really useful. And you've got to be really careful here because when you're communicating with participants, you don't want to come in, obviously, and say, well, I can see you turned it off, right? And be like big brother on them. You've got to be quite gentle in how you kind of communicate with participants. Like, we're wondering, is there any aspect of the app that you're finding difficult to run? Is there something we can do to make this easier? And so Lauren, you've had experience with that, of like dealing with participants in the field. And I don't know if you've got any reflections on that as well, of like the general approach of how you.
Yeah, I think. Okay, I think the risk of the gotcha situation is very high and can be very awkward at times. So like Dan said, just coming in with a really open mind and keeping in mind that, it may not just be a technical problem that they're dealing with the app, that something's not working, but it could be that, they've decided that actually they don't want to continue in the study or they don't want to continue using the app, and that also has to be totally respected, and that's completely fine as well. So, just being really mindful of people's what they're willing to do for us and
Yeah.
and when they're done. Yeah.
Thanks, Lauren. The sorry, I'll shut up in a sec, Dan. But like this stuff is just so useful and interesting as well because you get other context around the object that you're interested in studying. So for us, ads are really interesting, but we haven't even really had the time yet to go underneath the hood to look at some of these other statistics here, which are just so useful in terms of like you can do here rough calculations about number of ads someone's seeing per minute used and things like that. Which it just, really, really rich insights. And again, it brings us that idea of observability, right? This is from the user, what they are seeing, their situated perspective, which is just so different to a lot of the other ways in which we've studied social media using APIs and others from a production only rather than from the consumption standpoint. Sorry, Dan.
Great. And additionally, I want to bring your attention to something we call projects. And as I mentioned, we have been hosting 6, 7, maybe more projects until now. And some of them has like 1,000, if not 100,000 apps. And in order to separate the projects from one another, we allow researchers to create what we call a project. And inside a project, you are able to enter the code, the activation codes of only the participants in your study. So that way, you are not polluted with data from other studies, especially if it happens at around the same time. And in the project, you have the same view as before. You are able to browse through the participants. You can see over here, we have the classifications. I need to zoom in a bit. And we also have like content library data. If it says CCL or content commercial content library, it means we have enriched the data. And if we scroll down a bit, so this data set, it came from a study during the federal election period, and it focused on political advertisements. And as we can see, this looks like a comedian, but then if we go down, we have some ads on a politician. And it has, very clear visual that these are political ads, I think, like paid for by someone, and then I think, work towards free TEF and universal education. That seems like a campaign banner to me.
Can you do this is a really instructive example, Dan. Can you hover over the elected George Razay? All right. So see how it's got that bit wrong. So it's got EIECTED. So it's not quite OCR'd it correctly because there's a bit of motion blur at that top. So things like that, when Abdul's built the OCR approach, it will attempt to do that Levenstein distance to try and connect with other examples. So if that's any text like that which has been pulled, which has been used to try and connect it, to enrich it, it will go through variations. So particularly page names, when they come up, it will try other minor spelling variations and things like that to try and locate the page. But just an interesting one, so you can see, I just thought it was you could just see that one, it's just getting that bit wrong, whereas it's getting the rest correct.
Yeah.
But even the bounding box, it gives you a really good idea about how it's processing and unflattening that image to try and get the text back, to try and piece out all of what these things are. And so particularly in the location of these things on the page, there is some logic that Dan and Abdul have done to try and actually put them in certain spaces, right? So, because they're always going to consistently appear in the same part. So it tries to extract page name versus other text on the page as an example.
Yeah, awesome. And throw back to the enrichment step as well, I want to bring up the commercial content library. And we had a question about whether we are able to pick up all the different variations, and here they are. So sometimes we have an undertitle ad, and we can tell this is the same person as the one that appeared on the ad. And there would be some more as well. If I collapse that one and then browse another one, and we can see they have run a campaign since the 11th of April last year until the 3rd of May last year. So we can see the period, the different advertisement campaigns they have run. And even within a single one, I was wondering, this one doesn't really have any variation, but sometimes you get different variations within a single campaign as well, because they would cater for what should the ad appear on this screen size? Let's say you have an iPad, it should appear like this. If you have a desktop, it should appear like that. If you're on your phone, it should appear like so. It will cater for whether you're in orient, whether your screen is in landscape or portrait mode.
Yeah.
All right, and perhaps I'll go to the activity now. Yeah, because we have like 10 minutes left.
Yeah, it's fine. We'll go. I think we'll skip the demo where you use this today, because I'd favour more questions from you and us all getting to morning tea on time. But I think this gives you a good overview of all the functionality anyway. Yeah, we can talk. If you want to get your hands dirty on it though, come and see Dan and me in the break, and we can give you a login and that, and you can have a play yourself. But yeah, you keep going, Dan.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, I was going to briefly mention this is a JSON that we were talking about. It is highly nested. It has, if you can see it, or let me know if you can't see it. It has like demographic information which we have collected as well. And then you have like the device data. So the platform with Facebook. I think the device data is actually in the observers.
Yeah.
So.
And it's worth saying at this point as well, Dan, if I can. So some of this like demographic, this detail here, we've gathered from a survey that we administered on a different platform. And that's a deliberate choice, is we didn't load up the app on the Play Store with surveys or questionnaires or other kind of demographic collection, because we want to keep it separate from the research project itself. So think of the app as a fairly like neutral object. You will see, for those who've downloaded the app, you've got a 6-letter or 6-character ID. That's that ID that Dan has shown at the top, and you can see it at the top of some of the ads. So that is a pseudonymous kind of marker. So it's unique for you as a user, but we won't know that the identity of that person through the ID. It's only if you provide something that connects the ID to a real name, email, or that point of which you would connect and identify an individual in the database. And that's a really good safety mechanism, because it means that we're keeping participant information separate from the ad information. And it's only getting reconnected at this point where those two databases are being pulled together, and as Dan says, he's enriching it with that data there. So you can run this in a completely anonymous mode, where you're just getting people to download the app, submit the data. They might register their ID, but it's up to you what else you ask for from them in terms of real name or other kinds of details. Yeah, question? That's right.
Do you have any examples of where like a bunch of people have seen the same advertisement, but then they might have seen like different snippets of it? Or do you know what I mean? Like some people will look for longer than others. Like, is that something you're able to kind of?
Yeah, we do have a couple, but it's hard because it's like there's a lot of ads, and we've only run this with, like hundreds of people. And so it's really, really difficult. But yeah, you do get ads that definitely lots of people have seen the same ad. And so I don't know if you can quickly find any. And you got him running on a challenge, right? It's great. All right, I love this. Yeah, so the idea, and it will show this. So in the dashboard, Dan made it possible to see certain ads and if they've been seen by, and it actually shows here in the.
It will be, and it may take a while. I'm not sure if the internet is that great. Yeah. But here we go. This is from a same advertiser.
So you can see seen by. So you've got that 15056E and DCC74D.
Yeah, and now there you have another one as well.
Right, yeah. Oh, yeah, and this one here too. Right? So you see the same retailer. So yeah, so you can do that, and you can hone in on a particular ad seen by lots of people and that. And then, yeah, you've got the video. This is the other cool thing that Dan did with this is, from a qualitative researcher's perspective, you get the video, right? So you actually see that is how they saw it, right? So that video is not the video from the meta content, like the ad library. That is you seeing it as they've scrolled through. So you're going to see if someone's just gone straight past it. This person, yeah, they scroll past really quick by the look of it, Dan, right?
Yeah.
So it's like it barely showed up, and they would have just gone whoop, straight past, right? So yeah, you kind of get to see that. Whereas that they've hovered for a second or so. Yeah, that's it. So they're persisted on the ad for a little bit. Which brings me to another point here. I haven't mentioned it yet. Or maybe actually we need to round this out, Dan. Is that all right? Have you got any last two features?
Yeah, no, that's
That's it? All right, we're going to flip back because I'm going to just quickly talk about limitations. I'll just stop sharing. So we need to book a follow-up. Yeah, cool. All right, but I've just got to share a couple of things. All right, where are we?
Yep.
Cool. All right. Hang on. Oh, did I share? Oh no, I've shared the wrong thing. Hang on. I've got to put back in presenter view. All right. Yeah, so we did that. We're not going to do this bit. All right, challenges and limitations. All right, I think we've gone through most of this as we've been talking. Phones are different, and the API and SDK levels are different on different phones. So we've found this and using this in the field, the experience may differ. And so you're going to get some participants which you're just going to have to put your hands up and go, it's great that you were interested, but sorry, not this time, right? Navigating the politics of app stores. Every time something changes, we have to put a hot fix in the app store for the app, and that sometimes doesn't always go through. The other thing is that there's something that everyone needs to understand is that, and we've considered this deeply, we're using the accessibility features of Android's OS. Accessibility features are built for vision impairment, hearing impairment, other things where it's trying to, liberate the experience of using apps on phones to make sure they're accessible to all. It's a concern, but something that we've measured, as I said, we've discussed a lot, in building an app that essentially using accessibility services where they were never designed for this purpose, right? And so we don't take that decision lightly, but there's no other choice really. So that's one of those things of like, at its worst case, but I think the risk of this, as we've decided, is so infinitesimally small, is that Android turns off its accessibility features to stop us from doing this. I don't think that's going to happen. But again, we would be mortified if accessibility was diminished on account of us using this in this way for this purpose. Hot fixes can be delayed. So as I said, when something changes, it's days or weeks before the app will reflect that change. And so that's something that happens over time. Dependence on accessibility, we talked about that. This is overall stat. As Dan just showed you, this is a big beast. We're not talking about a Jupyter notebook. I mean, I love Jupyter notebook, but it's not like a script in a Jupyter notebook, right? We're talking about an infrastructure here to run this. App studies like this necessitate infrastructural thinking.
Yeah, and like not to mention the cost of running it as well, because we rely on the Amazon Web Services. So as far as I remember, it costs maybe like $3,000 or more a month to run the whole. Yeah, so it costs money to run this and keep it up, right? This is not one of those ones where it's lightweight, specware on the side. This is a big thing, and we have 2 full-time developers supporting it, right? Like this is big infrastructure, but we want people to use it. We want people to adapt it. So relying on the consistent UI. So if you get big changes, obviously you need to retrain the models. Can be changed completely without warning though. You don't know when this is going to happen. And as I've said already, differences between versions change this. Look, we have highly configured this to try and reduce the risk of personal data leakage. It's not impossible, though, for that to happen. So just be aware of that's something that needs to be written into ethics, that it's controlled as a risk, but you can't say it won't happen, right? But you just need to have protocols in place. And so we've done that with the dashboard. Do you want to just I'm just going to throw that in as well, because as a researcher, you are able to see the app that has been filtered by the mobile device and the cloud. But as a person, you can also filter them out manually as well by hiding the app on the dashboard and delete them permanently, if you will. Yeah. So that control is there just for the case that you get something sneak through that you look at and go, oh, you're right. I have seen, in the whole time we've been doing these studies in phase 2, I've seen one instance where I've had to hit the button and go, no, it was like a slice of a bottom of something that probably wasn't meant to be there. But otherwise, as I said, it's pretty accurate. Right. If you want more details about any of this, we've published it just recently in Computational Communication Research. And so you can read about that there. And so you can talk to Lauren or Dan or me about that as well.
and read more about the stack. It's got all the details of the app and everything in there. But yeah, we'll hang around for morning tea. If there's any other questions, maybe one quick hot question, if that's all right, Kat? Yeah. That's all right. Okay, let's just recap learning objectives though. So now you have an understanding of what the possibilities are for screen capture from mobile devices. You understand the ways in which you need to think about that, which is in terms of the user interface, the visual features that would trigger something to be seen as like, oh, this is an item of interest that I want to package and send off to the cloud. And you've had a bit of a drive through from Dan of what it looks like from the researcher's back end, of then what you can do in terms of post-processing of that, connecting it with other APIs to enrich the data, and ways in which you can then kind of post-study that activity within the dashboard. What we didn't touch on today is there is development happening within that dashboard to make versions and things available for interviews. So where you might sit down with a participant and show them their temporal feed. And so specific visualizations to support that kind of work if you want to do like a scroll back style interview, but do it with the real data. And the last thing I'll say is that, again, with scrollback, and Brady won't mind me saying this, Brady Rebeds, who's pioneered scrollback and that, he's a good colleague. We were doing some work together in a linkage project, and we had people doing manual screenshots of ads, and we actually found evidence that that was tuning the ad model because people were hovering over the ad of interest, which was giving a signal that they're interested in the ad. And so that was a feedback. And so this is a big plug that if you're going to use, of course, you can always get people to screenshot things, but understand that that is sending a signal. The cool thing about this is it's not sending a signal to the platform of interest in an item. So it's a very passive approach in terms of recording activity without intervening in the algorithmic environment of which that exists. So that's where I'll leave you on, is thinking about that in terms of why you would want to use this versus, say, screenshot methods or others, is that they have their place, but we know that now they do interfere with the model. Any last words, Dan?
Yeah, and I think I was going to spoil a bit about the integration with Australian Internet Observatory as well. Because yesterday, Michael showed you how to set up a project in the Australian Internet Observatory for setting up a data download package project. And the mobile observation of Ad Toolkit is going to be integrated in the same platform as well. So the process of setting up a project will be identical.